There's a certain kind of silence that speaks louder than words, the silence of someone who feels everything but shows almost nothing. You think they don't care, but the truth is, they care too much. And that's exactly why they hide. Language, for an avoidant, is not just a way to communicate. It's a survival mechanism. Words become armor, carefully chosen to maintain emotional distance while still fulfilling the social expectation of connection. When someone has learned that closeness leads to pain, that vulnerability invites rejection, their speech becomes a calculated performance. They learn early that silence protects, and that the right kind of detachment in words keeps them safe. So they talk in a way that allows them to be present without truly being seen. Their sentences are clean, measured, often void of emotional leakage. They might speak of feelings in abstract terms, rarely personal, and when they do, it's often coated with irony or indifference. This is not because they lack depth, but because depth feels dangerous. In conversation, you'll notice an avoidant rarely uses emotionally charged words. Instead of saying, "that hurt me," they'll say, "that was unexpected." Instead of, "I missed you," they might say, "it's been a while." These subtle shifts in language are not random. They are carefully designed exits from emotional exposure. For them, language functions like a shield, a way to participate without surrendering control. Vulnerability feels like an open wound, so they learn to speak in ways that cover it up, using logic, humor, or vague phrasing to stay safe. You might even feel like you're talking to someone through glass. You can see them, hear them, but something invisible keeps you from truly reaching them. When intimacy begins to deepen, their words tighten. They'll change the subject when emotion surfaces or respond to affection with analysis. If you express love, they may comment on the concept of love itself, not the feeling. If you share pain, they may respond with calm detachment, offering reason instead of empathy. It can be disorienting, even hurtful, to someone who craves emotional reciprocity because it feels like rejection. But for the avoidant, this is self-preservation. They are not trying to hurt you. They are trying to keep themselves from falling into the kind of emotional chaos they once knew too well. Their language becomes a quiet fortress, structured and deliberate, where no uninvited feeling can enter. This emotional distance in speech also manifests in timing. Avoidants often pause before responding, not because they are thoughtful, but because they are scanning for danger. They are filtering every word for risk. Will this make me seem too attached, too available, too vulnerable? They have internalized the belief that words can expose weakness, and so they speak like someone handling fragile glass, careful not to drop anything that might reveal too much. Even their tone carries subtle restraint. It's often calm, cool, and composed, a tonal camouflage that hides the storm of fear and longing beneath. When they do open up, it's rarely spontaneous. It's planned, controlled, almost rehearsed. They might admit something vulnerable, but quickly retreat into intellectual commentary or humor, softening the emotional weight of what they just said. You'll hear them say things like, "I guess that affected me more than I thought," or "it's not a big deal," even when it clearly is. These linguistic patterns are not signs of indifference. They're signs of someone who has learned that emotional honesty once cost them safety. The tragedy is that beneath this carefully managed communication lies a profound longing to be understood. The very thing they fear, emotional connection, is also what they crave most. But years of conditioning have taught them that expression equals exposure, and exposure equals pain. So, instead of reaching out, they retreat behind language that sounds mature, rational, or self-contained. It's a language of survival, not intimacy. If you listen closely, you can feel the contradiction in their words, the pull between wanting to be seen and needing to stay hidden. Every phrase carries both hope and fear, both desire and defense. Their words are not empty. They're full of history, full of unspoken stories about why they had to learn to talk this way just to feel safe in a world that once made them afraid to feel at all. When emotions begin to rise in a conversation, an avoidant instinctively shifts toward logic. It's not that they feel deeply, but the rawness of emotion feels like losing control, like stepping into a space where nothing can be measured or contained. Logic, on the other hand, feels safe. It offers clarity, structure, distance. So when confronted with emotional intensity, they automatically move toward intellectual reasoning as a form of defense. This is why avoidants often appear calm or composed during emotional moments, even when something inside them is quietly trembling. Their mind becomes their shield, translating every feeling into a concept, every heartbreak into a theory. When someone expresses love or vulnerability, an avoidant may respond with questions or analysis instead of reciprocation. They might say, "Why do you feel that way?" Or, "What does love even mean?" instead of, "I feel that too." The shift from emotion to intellect is their escape route. It's not that they don't care, it's that caring openly feels unsafe. By analyzing emotions rather than experiencing them, they regain a sense of control. This is the essence of their emotional deflection. They turn feelings into puzzles they can solve, rather than waves they must survive. Their words often sound detached, thoughtful, even philosophical, but beneath that surface is a deep fear of being overwhelmed by emotion. This tendency becomes especially visible in conflict. While others might raise their voice, cry, or express frustration, the avoidant withdraws into cool rationality. They will talk about the situation, the pattern, or what makes sense, rather than what they actually feel. You might be crying, wanting comfort or closeness, and they'll respond with, "Let's look at this logically," or "Getting emotional won't help." These responses can feel cold or invalidating, but for the avoidant, they are a lifeline. They were often taught directly or indirectly that emotions are dangerous, that expressing them leads to disappointment or rejection. So they learn to survive by thinking instead of feeling. Their speech reflects this pattern in subtle ways. You'll notice an emphasis on reasoning words, maybe, probably, technically, I think, rather than feeling words like I want or I miss. They construct sentences that sound balanced, factual, and emotionally neutral. It gives them a sense of safety, as if logic can prevent vulnerability from slipping through. Even in moments when their heart aches, they'll speak as though they are observing the emotion from a distance, not living it. They might say, "It's interesting how people get attached so easily," when what they really mean is, "I'm scared of how attached I'm becoming." This intellectualization isn't limited to relationships. It appears in how they process grief, disappointment, or love. When faced with loss, they analyze the meaning of it. When offered affection, they question its authenticity. When something good happens, they think about its implications rather than simply feeling joy. Their mind constantly translates emotion into data. It's not a conscious choice. It's an ingrained reflex, born from a belief that thinking keeps them safe from the unpredictable storm of feeling. To those who love them, this can be deeply confusing. It can seem like they're avoiding intimacy, or worse, that they're incapable of empathy. But in truth, they're trying to avoid the collapse that raw emotion once caused within them. Logic, for them, is emotional armor. It gives them space to breathe, to remain upright, to feel like they can manage what's happening without drowning in it. When an avoidant talks in circles of analysis, what they're really doing is trying to make the unknown predictable, to turn chaos into comprehension. It's not indifference, it's fear disguised as control. The irony is that their intellect, the very tool that keeps them safe, also keeps them alone. By living through logic, they filter out the warmth that makes connection real. But to them, this feels necessary. It's the only way they know to survive closeness without losing themselves. So they keep analyzing, explaining, and rationalizing their emotions until the feelings are quiet enough to ignore, even if those feelings are the very thing they secretly wish they could finally express. Control is the silent language of the avoidant. Every word, every pause, every deflection serves one quiet purpose: to keep their emotional world within limits they can manage. To an avoidant, closeness is unpredictable, and unpredictability feels like danger, so they learn to control what they can: their space, their timing, and most of all, their words. The way they talk often carries an invisible boundary, a quiet signal that says, "Don't come too close." They speak as if they're standing behind a glass wall, where connection is visible but never fully accessible. Their language reflects this constant balancing act between wanting to be known and needing to remain safe. You'll often hear them use phrases that reinforce independence. They might say, "I don't really need anyone," or "I'm fine on my own." To the listener, these statements sound confident, even strong, but underneath them is an undercurrent of fear. What they truly mean is, depending on someone feels dangerous. For them, control equals safety. Losing control, whether of their emotions, their environment, or the narrative of a relationship, feels like losing themselves. So they communicate in ways that reassert that control, often without realizing it. They keep conversations focused on neutral topics, avoid emotional depth, and frame their language to minimize attachment. If someone tries to get closer, they shift the topic or create emotional distance with subtle detachment in tone. When they begin to sense emotional pressure, their words become even more measured. They might use logic to redirect the conversation or humor to lighten intensity. They'll downplay meaningful moments with phrases like, "It's not a big deal," or "You're overthinking it." These aren't casual remarks. They're protective maneuvers. Every emotionally loaded situation triggers an internal alarm, reminding them that too much closeness threatens their sense of stability. They've learned that vulnerability invites loss, and so their control becomes a survival instinct. Their language becomes a tool to regulate the distance between themselves and others, ensuring that no one has enough access to hurt them. In romantic or intimate conversations, this pattern becomes even more visible. If someone says, "I miss you," the avoidant might respond with, "I've just been busy," or "We'll catch up soon," instead of acknowledging the emotional weight behind the words. They may avoid using "we" and prefer "I," not out of selfishness, but because collective language implies connection, and connection implies risk. Their independence is both a shield and a prison. By maintaining control through detachment, they preserve autonomy but sacrifice closeness. They appear calm, self-contained, and unmoved, but that composure is often the mask of someone who fears being emotionally overpowered. This need for control also extends to how they handle conflict. While others might seek resolution through emotional expression, avoidants tend to withdraw, shut down, or rationalize the issue. They'll say things like, "Let's not make this dramatic," or "I just need space." To them, emotional conflict threatens their inner order, so they retreat to regain balance. What looks like coldness is often a desperate attempt to avoid the chaos that intimacy can unleash inside them. Their detachment isn't cruelty, it's fear translated into silence. What makes this form of control particularly complex is that it's not just external, it's internal. Avoidants don't only control others through distance, they control themselves. They police their own feelings, censor their impulses, and downplay their needs. You might hear them say, "I don't really care," when in truth they care deeply, but can't bear the loss of composure that comes with admitting it. Their words are designed to sound stable, but inside there's a constant battle between longing and restraint. They crave connection but fear dependence, desire closeness but dread vulnerability. This control gives them a fragile sense of power. As long as they manage the narrative, they feel safe. But this safety is costly. The same language that protects them also isolates them. Every guarded phrase reinforces the walls they wish someone could climb over. Yet in their world, losing control means exposure, and exposure still feels like danger. So they keep speaking in measured tones, maintaining distance through control, convincing themselves that safety is better than surrender, even when their heart quietly aches for the closeness their words won't allow. For the avoidant, independence is more than a lifestyle. It's a shield against the fear of being hurt. On the surface, they appear self-sufficient, calm, and capable. They speak with confidence about not needing anyone, about valuing space, about being fine on their own. But beneath those words lies a quieter truth. Their independence is not built on freedom. It's built on fear. Every phrase that declares self-reliance often hides the memory of dependence that once led to disappointment, rejection, or pain. The avoidant learned, sometimes very early in life, that relying on others can be dangerous. When love once came with inconsistency or withdrawal, when needs were met with rejection, they internalized a rule. Safety is found in self-sufficiency, and so their words, their actions, and even their emotional patterns became shaped by that belief. When you listen closely to how they talk about relationships, the fear disguised as independence becomes clear. They may say, "I just don't like getting too attached," or "I'm not the kind of person who needs constant attention." These statements sound mature, even admirable, but they carry an undertone of avoidance. They've convinced themselves that distance is strength, that needing someone makes them weak, that closeness equals control. To them, the idea of depending on another person feels suffocating because dependence means losing control of their emotional stability. So, they glorify independence to mask the terror of vulnerability. Their tone remains even, measured, sometimes indifferent. But that detachment is not serenity. It's armor. In conversations that hint at intimacy, this fear becomes even more visible. When someone expresses affection, they downplay it. When someone wants closeness, they pull back under the guise of needing space. They may say, "I just need time to think," or "I don't want to rush things." But what they truly mean is, "I'm afraid of what this closeness might do to me." They frame emotional withdrawal as a logical choice, but beneath it is panic. A panic so subtle that even they may not notice it. Their independence becomes their identity, their proof that they are untouchable, unbreakable, self-contained. Yet the truth is that much of this independence is defensive. It's a preemptive strike against rejection. If they never need anyone, they can never be left. Their speech patterns reflect this paradox. They often use language that separates rather than joins. You'll hear you and I, rarely we. Even in moments of tenderness, they may speak in general terms, avoiding the vulnerability of direct emotional connection. They may express their feelings indirectly through actions or hints, but words of intimacy make them uneasy. When they do speak about emotions, it's often with caution, as if each word might give away too much. Their independence demands control over what is revealed and what remains hidden. That control, however, slowly isolates them, turning their need for freedom into a form of emotional exile. In relationships, this fear-driven independence can be deeply confusing for the other person. The avoidant partner seems strong, capable, and self-assured, yet simultaneously unreachable. When love deepens, the avoidant often feels trapped, even if the other person is gentle and patient. The closer someone gets, the more the avoidant feels the urge to retreat, to reassert independence as a way of regaining emotional balance. They may withdraw suddenly, stop responding, or use cool, distant language to re-establish space. It's not that they stopped caring, it's that caring too much makes them feel exposed. What makes this pattern so tragic is that the avoidant's longing for connection never truly disappears. Beneath the layers of independence lies a heart that still wants to be seen, to be understood, to be loved without fear. But the old conditioning whispers that closeness means danger, that love cannot coexist with freedom. So they continue to speak the language of self-reliance, convincing both themselves and others that they don't need what they secretly crave. Their independence becomes a mask, one that hides not strength but vulnerability. They appear to have mastered the art of detachment, but deep within they're still standing guard against a pain they never want to feel again. Every word that insists on freedom carries an echo of the fear that once made dependence unbearable, and until that fear is faced, independence remains their safest prison. When an avoidant person expresses emotion, it rarely comes out in the way most people expect. Their feelings don't flow directly. They leak through metaphors, generalizations, or detached observations. It's not that they don't feel. They feel intensely. But for them, emotion is something to be handled carefully, like fire. It warms, but it can also burn. So instead of saying, "I'm hurt," they might tell a story about someone else being hurt. Instead of admitting, "I miss you," they'll say, "It's strange how people drift apart." Their emotions are filtered through distance, wrapped in indirect language that keeps them safe from the vulnerability of being truly seen. This form of expression allows them to participate in emotional communication without surrendering control. Their emotional vocabulary is often abstract, poetic even, but lacking immediacy. They speak as if narrating their feelings from afar. When they do reveal something personal, they'll soften it with humor or irony, creating a cushion between themselves and the listener. You might hear them say, "I guess that got to me a little," when what they mean is, "It broke me." They disguise the weight of their emotions with understatement because intensity feels like exposure. The less they reveal, the safer they feel. To them, direct emotional honesty feels like standing naked in a storm. There's no protection, no control, no guarantee of being understood. So they choose indirection, speaking in symbols, observations, or hypotheticals that keep the heart safely concealed behind the intellect. Their tone, too, reflects this avoidance. It's often calm, composed, or even flat when discussing topics that would normally stir emotion. They might speak about love, heartbreak, or loneliness as if they're analyzing a painting rather than recalling their own experiences. This calmness can confuse others, especially those who seek emotional reciprocity. The listener might assume the avoidant doesn't care, but in truth, the avoidant is trying to manage emotions that feel too big to handle openly. By controlling their voice, they control their exposure. It's an instinctive defense mechanism developed over years of learning that open emotion leads to vulnerability, and vulnerability leads to pain. You'll also notice that their expressions of affection are subtle, hidden in gestures rather than declarations. Instead of saying, "I love you," they might fix something for you, check in when you're sick, or quietly remember something you mentioned weeks ago. These actions speak what their words cannot, but when they do attempt to verbalize emotion, it often comes out fragmented, indirect, or in moments when they feel momentarily safe. Even then, they might retract or minimize it afterward, as if ashamed of having let their guard down. They may follow a rare moment of openness with distance, silence, or even withdrawal, needing time to restore their sense of control. In relationships, this pattern often leads to misunderstanding. The person on the receiving end of their emotional subtlety may feel unloved, unappreciated, or shut out, when in reality, the avoidant is expressing as much as they can bear to. They want to be known, but not too deeply. They want to love, but without losing themselves. Their indirect communication is a compromise between desire and fear. They long for connection but fear the cost of it, so they let their emotions out in fragments, testing whether the world is safe enough to receive them. When they do share something real, even in passing, it's often a rare glimpse into their inner world. But because they fear rejection or judgment, they might later act as if it meant nothing. That contradiction, the giving and taking back, is a defining feature of their emotional expression. It's not manipulation, it's self-protection. Their inner narrative tells them that if they expose too much, they'll be hurt or abandoned. So they build a language of emotional hints and metaphors, one that allows them to communicate without being vulnerable. Deep down, avoidants wish someone could hear the feelings behind their words, the emotion buried in their restraint, the longing hidden in their logic. But their fear of being misunderstood is stronger than their desire to be known. So they keep speaking in coded ways, hoping the right person will understand the silence between the sentences. Their indirect expression isn't a lack of emotion. It's the only way they've learned to survive emotion. Every story, every generalization, every calm response hides the tremor of a heart that still wants to feel, but has learned that safety comes only in distance and expression must never come without disguise. When you truly understand the avoidant, you begin to see that their distance isn't rejection, it's protection. Their walls were not built to keep love out, but to keep pain from coming in again. Every detached word, every calm tone, every carefully measured sentence is the language of someone who once felt too deeply and never learned how to feel safely again. They long for connection just as much as anyone else, but they fear being consumed by it. Beneath the armor of logic and independence lies a soul quietly searching for safety, not in solitude, but in the kind of love that doesn't demand their surrender. The key to understanding them is patience, the kind that listens beyond words, that recognizes the emotion hidden in restraint, the longing buried inside silence. Because when an avoidant finally feels safe enough to let their guard fall, what emerges isn't coldness at all, but warmth that's been waiting its whole life to be seen. And when they finally speak from that place, their words no longer protect, they connect, revealing that the walls were never about indifference, only about fear, and that fear, when met with gentleness, can finally learn how to love.